Researchers are receiving almost €9 million in funding today as they search for a more effective treatment for diabetes. More than 225,000 people are living with diabetes in Ireland, but this new treatment could gradually change the dependence on injected insulin and could possibly reverse the illness in young children if they were diagnosed early enough. Dr Garry Duffy is an AMBER investigator coordinating the research, and he's with me now. This is very exciting stuff.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pat, for having me on. We're very excited to kick it off today. It'll start on June 3rd, so we're heading over to Brussels to do the full kick-off then.
Okay, now tell me where the idea for this treatment came from.
Yeah, so at the moment you can actually treat some of these patients with cell transplants. So they take these cells from the patient's pancreas.
They're called islet cells.
Islet cells, and they produce insulin in response to glucose in the bloodstream. So the idea behind the project that we're starting called DRIVE is that we would develop new materials to help integrate those cells better in the human body. So we want them to last longer, we want them to integrate better into the system, and then we want to hopefully improve treatments for type 1 diabetes and others.
I remember reading about a patient in Britain who had, I think, very hard to manage diabetes, and they did some islet transplants, but they transplanted them into the liver.
Yeah, so at the moment they infuse them into a vein that flows, or a blood vessel that flows into the liver, and they hope that some of these cells retain in the liver after delivery. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them in a different place. We're going to put them into the abdomen, and we're going to put them in capsules, so they're not going to be flown into a blood vessel, and we hope that that will improve retention, so we get more cells to stay, and then if more cells stay, you get better control over your diabetes.
The pancreatic transplants, I mean, where do they get the islet cells? Are these from people who have met in traffic accidents?
Exactly, so they're donated organs, and in general you need 4 pancreases per patient per treatment. So if you imagine you need to find 4 donors per 1 patient for treatment. We would hope that this project would reduce the need and the number of donors, so we would hope that we would maybe get 2 pancreas donors per patient would work.
Instead of 4?
Instead of 4, yeah.
But talk to me about the rate of attrition of these islet cells in the liver, in the conventional way. I mean, if you put 100 in, how many would remain?
Yeah, so generally we think maybe around 25% retention, so you lose about 75% of the donor. The other issue is rejection actually as well, because you're taking donor islets and then delivering them back into the patient. So you will also lose over time more of those 25%, so more that actually stick over time, they may be rejected. So most patients are on immune rejection regimens to try and stop that, so some drugs to try and stop rejection of the islets.
Now many people manage their diabetes quite successfully with insulin, be it an insulin pump, or if it's type 2, even with medication that they can take.
Exactly, and lifestyle changes and exercise.
But we really are talking about hard to manage patients.
So complicated patients. The biggest worry about insulin delivery is that you get a hypoglycemic event, so that means that there's not enough glucose available, so you may have a fainting episode or things like that. So really we want this to, in those particular patients, so patients who are hard to manage, that insulin either by pump or daily injection is not working considerably well.
I mean, they now have a detector which will act as, if you like, the monitor of the blood glucose, and it talks to the pump, and so the two of them just manage as if it were a pancreas.
Exactly.
But that doesn't work for everyone.
No, it doesn't work for everybody. So sometimes there's a mismatch in that reading between the glucose levels and when insulin actually acts on the glucose. So there's a mismatch often. So it's those complicated patients that this particular treatment is aimed at.
One of the great hopes in the past was that in the petri dish they could take islet cells, and even in people who have chronic type 1 diabetes, they say there are 1 or 2 little islet cells that might still be pumping out the insulin.
Exactly.
So if you can get one of those, put it in the petri dish, multiply it, and then you can have a transplant of your own insulin cells. How far down the road is that?
Yeah, I think there was a very recent publication for the Harvard Stem Cell Institute that shows that is very much a reality. But because type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune where the body rejects those cells, you may have that consequence as well.
Just rejecting, even though you multiply them in the petri dish, put them in, and it still says, don't like you, goodbye.
Exactly. It's the same problem that underlies type 1 diabetes. So maybe there is an opportunity to protect those cells. So as part of our DRIVE project, we're going to come up with capsules that actually protect the cells from immune rejection. So we don't want them to actually be seen as a negative cell type in the human body.
Now explain to me how, within the capsule, you have these little islet cells which respond to the presence of glucose by producing insulin. If they're in a capsule, how do they keep
Yeah,
operating.
so we hope that the capsule that we're actually developing will have pores in it, so actual pore sizes. So what it will do, it'll stop immune cells getting in to basically kill off the cells, but it will allow insulin out and glucose in because they're small molecules. They're not a big cell, they're much smaller. So we'd hope that would help in protecting them. The second thing that we will do is we'll deliver drugs locally that will actually stop the immune cells multiplying or having a reaction against it. So really like someone taking an oral immune suppressive drug, these patients would actually have the local immune suppression right beside the graft, so it's right next door to where we put
How
those
big
islets.
would this capsule be?
We hope to make it modular, so it actually won't be that big, and about 2 centimeters, but we can put numbers of them in, so it won't be just one large capsule. It may be 5 of it, the 2 centimeter capsule. And the idea behind it is that we can change that depending on patient needs. So if a patient needs a lot of islets, you can put in 5. If not as many, 2, and then we can tailor that to patient need.
Now, you seem to be absolutely convinced this is going to work. It's a matter of just getting the materials right and
yeah, and I think that I'm kind of one of 14 partners from around Europe. So we have experts who are currently doing these islet transplantations in the University of Oxford and a group in Guarda in Italy. So we've got the experts who are already doing this treatment, and they've identified an unmet need, and that's what we're trying to fill. So I'm very much hopeful that this will work and will reach the clinic.
What would be the cost, if you finally got it to market? Because it would be, based on those figures, a mass market application.
Yeah, so cost, I think we're probably down to the benefit associated with that. I can't put a number on the cost initially, but...
I'm just wondering how complicated the science is for manufacturing this kind of thing.
Exactly. There is a lot of that issue around the materials and around the capsule manufacturing, but we would hope that we'd overcome some of those hurdles initially. So we'd hope that the cost won't be prohibitive for the treatment. That we will.
Is there anything in this that needs, in Britain, in America, FDA approval, or in Europe and so on? Or is all of this stuff, it's out there and it doesn't therefore need, 10-year testing?
Yeah, so we've tried to use materials that are already being used in patients, so that might help the regulatory path. So like you said, the FDA, we have to deal with the European Medicines Agency. This would be considered an advanced medicines product, so it would have to go through a regulatory path, but that's all built into our program. So over the next 4 years, we'll have direct meetings with those regulators, get them to input on the work program and try and improve it and get it over the line.
Yeah. I mean, can you see anything, if you manage to solve the technical problems, can you see anything that might go wrong? The old capsule's not going to float off and block an artery or anything like that.
We're actually going to put them in the abdomen and hopefully protect them in a way. But we feel that if anything does go wrong, we're going to make sure those capsules are retrievable, and then we can actually replace them again. So if they stop working, we can go back in and replenish and replace that capsule. So we'd hope that we have some kind of fallbacks for anything that might happen in a negative sense.
And finally, the notion that you could reverse type 1 diabetes in very young children who are diagnosed young.
Yes, yeah. So that is the primary aim, that we would initially, that is our focus in terms of patient population, but I think it would become wider. We would hope with the group that our aim is that the graft would last for 5 years, and then you go and replace that graft. So every 5 years.
It's a microsurgery thing.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a minimally invasive surgery. So I'm from the Royal College of Surgeons, so we'll work on that surgical procedure to make sure it's minimally invasive and ease of use.
Very good. It's very exciting stuff, I have to say.
Thank you very
Dr.
much.
Garry Duffy, Amber investigator and coordinating this research, hopefully to bring a breakthrough in the treatment of diabetes. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Still to come in our tech slot, although that was very technical, we'll be discuss the Chinese smartphone maker who promises to make wearable technology more affordable. And we'll find out how good it is after this.